How many millions of users or subscribers do you have across all of these properties?
Many millions, over 100 million monthly.
Well, let's talk about that healthy tension between advertising and subscriptions.
People are not opposed to advertising, they're opposed to bad or intrusive advertising. It really is on the product team to find the solutions that better integrates advertising into the experience so it doesn't feel intrusive and it does feel premium. There's somewhat of a misconception that product management is just about user needs. That would be so easy, but that's really not the case.
What are the OKRs or main goals that the product team is ultimately responsible for?
We think about reach, engagement, satisfaction, and then kind of performance as it underlays the three of those. I don't believe that in product management you have to be technical. I always say you have to understand systems.
This episode is brought to you by Pendo, the all-in-one product management platform for any type of application. With Pendo, you don't have to bounce around multiple tools to figure out what's really happening inside your product. Pendo makes it easy to answer critical questions about how users are engaging with your product, and then turn those insights into action. Also, you can get your users to do what you actually want them to do. Visit pendo.io/product school to create your free account today and start building better experiences across every single corner of your product. That's pendo.io/product school. Hey everyone, this is Carlos. I'm the founder and CEO at Product School. Today I'm here with Ryan Dally Gallardo, who is the Senior Vice President of Consumer Products at Dow Jones. Ryan leads product management for Dow Jones consumer brands, including the Wall Street Journal, Barron's, and MarketWatch. She has a background in market research and analytics, and she started there as an intern 13 years ago and grew through the ranks to become a Senior Vice President of Products. So we definitely need to learn more about that, as well as how you're building products for a multi-million audience. So welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thank you, Carlos, so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, you have to tell me more about how you got started as an intern
and then
grew through the ranks.
In a galaxy far, far away, yes.
But maybe we can start from the top. So what is Dow Jones in a nutshell?
Yeah, so Dow Jones is quite a large company. We are providers of news, data, and information to business professionals and companies. So it is quite a large brand, but we do have a B2B side of the business that represents brands like Factiva and Newswires. And then my responsibilities and my remit are primarily over the consumer brands. So those are things that this audience are probably most familiar with, the Wall Street Journal being our flagship brand, as well as Barron's and MarketWatch. So my remit is the product management team that covers those brands as well as a few others. And again, the websites and the apps that you access, the Wall Street Journal, Barron's, and MarketWatch on.
How many millions of, I don't know how you qualify it, users or subscribers do you have across all of these properties?
Many millions. So again, I will want to check this, but over 100 million monthlies.
Over 100 million monthlies. Okay. And you are the person behind the product. So we're going to have a good conversation, because it definitely, and a lot of people in our podcast want to learn more about how, so they can also take some of those learnings for their own products. So tell me more about your upbringing and how it shaped the type of leader that you are today.
Yeah, wow, we're going right there. Okay, so I think my background, my upbringing, I actually come from a very large family. I have 4 brothers, so I'm one of 5. My mother is one of 6. She actually has almost 50 first cousins. So you start to see how you're interacting with quite a few different personalities throughout that mix. Having a lot of different communication styles come at you and having to communicate across the board. So I think my upbringing there really led me into being a great communicator if you think about product management and the different types of groups that you have to speak to in terms of speaking to people how they want to be spoken to. It's kind of a core concept that I think I gained, again, just based on the size of my family and the need to get my point across to various different peoples, that has actually translated really well into product management specifically.
I come from a large family as well, all boys. And I remember trying to raise my voice as a way to get attention. Obviously, at work, now there are other mechanisms, but I think that there is something about feeling that type of pressure to get attention from parents, and like eventually lead. I was the older brother, so I was assigned a leadership role without asking for it too early.
Yeah, there's a little sense of also like thriving in chaos. And to your point, Carlos, you know, you get 2 minutes at the dinner table. You better use your 2 minutes wisely.
Yeah, so you have a background in analytics, and you mentioned that your first job at Dow Jones was in finance, right?
Yes, yeah. So I actually started my undergrad in business with a specialty in corporate finance. Thought I wanted to be a CEO. Took the internship opportunity at Dow Jones in the billing department. Sounds really exciting. Guess what? It wasn't very exciting for me. I will say I thought I wanted to do numbers, but working with billing numbers was not as fun as I thought it would be. So from there, out of school, I said, what can I still do with numbers? And that's where market research really came into play. So I got a role at the Barron's brand doing market research. And at that point, product managers didn't really exist. So I knew kind of who our audience was through my market research background and started to take on additional responsibilities as it related to digital analytics. No one was really doing it. So they said, go learn Adobe Omniture. And I said, okay. So at that point, you really have the perfect storm for a background in product management. Market research is knowing who your audience is, and data analytics is knowing what they actually do. So with that in mind, I was product manager number one at Barron's. And from there, built out the product management team at that brand. And then throughout my years, just took on added capabilities and responsibilities. At this point, I've touched almost individually every one of the individual brands at Dow Jones. And now I'm kind of looking after them as a whole portfolio.
And how did you earn the respect of the technical folks, like the engineers and other people that don't come from your background?
Yeah. And I always say, I don't believe that in product management you have to be technical. I always say you have to understand systems. So I do not code, but I love to understand how things work and how they things work together. So again, I don't think you have to be technical, and maybe this is some people would consider this technical, but how one system feeds into the next is very different than writing code. And that's something that I've always been interested in, and I think been pretty good at.
So, as an SVP of product who's now overseeing multiple products, can you tell me more about how you design your own org?
Yeah, it's been a journey at Dow Jones. You know, I've obviously been here for so many years, and in the past, the teams really operated in a much more siloed manner. So when I was product manager number one at Barron's, you know, we weren't really even talking to the product management teams at the other areas of the company, nor were the engineering teams. So throughout the time that I've been at Dow Jones, we've been on quite a structural journey, if you will, which it's at present day, it is still about how kind of the brand product owners interact with the platform product owners. And that's one key area of my org that I've done a lot of thinking around. So again, the brand product owners are the subject matter experts, if you will, at their audience, at their business needs, really who their users are and how their business models are different. The platform product owners are the subject matter experts on those individual platforms. Now, any given project or product development can require the need for both of those sets of product managers. And in that, it's really about how to drive close collaboration, but really clarity. That's very important. So we've developed this concept, if you will, about kind of front seat, back seat. And again, it's not really, it's more than just developing it as a concept, but laying that out from the beginning of any given project very explicitly. If there is a project that is going to involve both the Barron's product lead as well as the app platform product owner, again, laying that out from the beginning, who's really driving versus who's feeding in is very important to the success of that type of structure.
So is the backseat the product owner the one who focuses on the platform side of things?
It depends on the project. So it really is dependent upon the project. If you think about kind of a re-platform project, that would probably lean more onto the platform owner versus developing a set of features for any given audience or any given brand would lead more heavily on the brand product owner.
Got it. So basically, for any given project, you decide who is going to be taking the lead.
Correct.
That person could be in platform, or that person could be a subject matter expert for a consumer-facing product.
Exactly, exactly. And what we found is that it's very important to be explicit about that. Again, you can't assume anyone thinks people are going to think different things or have different things in their mind. So it's really important about setting that up front and being truly explicit about that.
So you talk about Barron's, and what about Wall Street Journal and Market Watch, for example? Do you have like dedicated product teams for each of the brands?
Correct. So there is a product owner, if you will, for each of the brands, inclusive of the Wall Street Journal, Barron's, Market Watch, as well as some of our other brands, including Mansion Global and Financial News. So those are kind of brand product owners. And then there are platform product owners if you think about the mobile application, newsletters and alerts, or audio and video.
And then is there a platform underneath all of those products?
So if you think about platform, they are kind of the mobile app platform is a platform, if you will. So how they're connected is of course important, but when I think about product platform ownership, it really is about kind of a a channel, if you will, alerts, mobile app, audio, video, etc.
So what I'm trying to understand is, in addition to having those platforms per product, like the mobile app or other channels, like is there an underlying platform that connects all of the brands that is trying to support all the different products, or are you operating more of a model where each product has its own independence, its own resources?
Yeah, so that's where the balance comes into play. Each of the individual brands have their own distinct engineering teams that actually are building into the platform. So, again, for the example where Barron's is developing features and functionality for their own audience, they're actually building that in a way where if MarketWatch wants to leverage and use those same features and functionality, they're more easily able to do so.
Mhm. And how often do you rethink the design of your org given the growth of the different products?
Yeah, I mean, look, change is hard and we try not to be constantly adjusting the organization. I also think it's much better to do it in an iterative way where the real needs are and not, every 5 years do a rip off the band-aid. Let's completely rethink about this. So even what I mentioned, we've gotten there over the course of many, many years in terms of being iterative about this approach.
Because one of the things that I've noticed, and even large organizations, as they start bringing more professionals like you. I mean, you've been there for a long time, but like a lot of these companies would hire a chief product officer, or an SVP of product, and then suddenly there's this shock to the system, right, where there is not a head at the table that is creating that awareness, and then it just creates much more of a cultural tension. So I wonder, for an organization where you've been part of, even how is that how does that help you kind of like get the rapport from other people and then eventually make changes? Because obviously you need to make some changes, but with a common understanding that this is not going to be like rip off the band-aid. We do a transformation, we rip off the band-aid, then we do another reorg, which kind of like demoralizes everybody.
Yeah, and again, it has been iterative. So even the role that I'm in today as SVP of consumer product, again, I've been here for 13 plus years. It did not exist. So historically and 10 plus years ago, each of the individual product teams actually reported into different areas of the business. So slowly over the course of the years, they've kind of structured a more formal product organization within Dow Jones, which now has a head, if you will, that is actually overseeing how all these things come together, which goes back to I do believe that structure is important and that it actually matters.
So as you have now this seat at the table, like what are the OKRs or main goals that the product team is ultimately responsible for?
Yeah. So when we think about product health and North Star metrics, if you will, we've done a little bit of work to kind of organize our thoughts and communicate better with the company. So when we think about them, we think about reach, engagement, satisfaction, and then kind of performance as it underlays the three of those. So from a reach perspective, how many people are using our products? How many eyeballs do we have? When we're looking at engagement, we kind of break that down looking at both frequency as well as depth. So frequency, how often are they coming back to us? Depth, how long are they staying with our products over time? Satisfaction is one where we're still working out what we feel like is the right metric, if you will, looking at things like net promoter score and other, but we haven't necessarily landed on that. And then, of course, we obviously do not want to lose sight of performance. And that has different KPIs based on the different platform that you're thinking about, whether it's core web vitals for web or different for mobile app. But really performance, if you think about it, plays into those three pillars above. If you think about reach, engagement, and satisfaction. So we're on a journey, but we have done quite a bit of work to get better at communicating how product health looks and what a healthy product should look like and how those things ladder up to some of the business goals.
Yeah, that is a key part that I want to go a little deeper on. Like, okay, we set these big goals at the high level, and then you have a large company, a large team. How do you go about bringing them into the conversation, keeping them accountable, and making sure that they know that the goal that you set at the top is not just for you or the inner circle, it's also for them, and they also feel empowered to create some initiatives that can push the specific goals?
Yeah, I think, look, we're not there yet, but what I just said, even how we're able to communicate those four pillars is step one. Step two that we're in the process on is making sure that the product team has access to the data in that organized manner. So we've done quite a bit of work with our analytics team in terms of setting up dashboards based on that structure that we've now communicated with the business, so that each of the individual product managers has access to the same data in the same way so that we are all talking about the same numbers. I think the challenge is those are very large numbers. We talk about them as product health or North Star metrics. Then when you're looking at an individual product or project deliverable, those often have KPIs that even ladder up to that.
And ultimately, the business model for the consumer products that you lead is a subscription, right?
Yeah, it's mostly subscription, but of course we do still have a healthy advertising component of that as well.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that healthy tension between advertising and subscription. So, well, first of all, like, can you tell us a little bit more about how you think about having a product that has a huge user base with kind of like a PLG motion, if you will, that was probably PLG before the world knew how to call it, and then introduce some layers that are paid and make sure that you also have this other business source advertising that is adding value and not reducing some of the OKRs that you are trying to push for.
Yeah. And I will say Wall Street Journal had the first paywall. So there you go.
Boom.
We're definitely not new to that. I think at the end of the day, the business is not misaligned. They do want the best experience for our users, even looking at the advertising team, right? When you think about what I just laid out, reach, engagement, satisfaction, that is going to drive more usage of our products across the board, more engagement for our products across the board, which are healthy things for advertising, just as they're a healthy thing for subscription. So I think it's a little bit of a misconception that there's some misalignment between the advertising and subscription team. I think as you get into specific deliverables, that's also where I believe there's somewhat of a misconception that product management is just about user needs. User needs are at our core, of course, but that would be so easy, right? Like if we were just building for users and didn't have to think through subscription and the business needs, that would be a lot easier. There would be no paywall and there'd be no ads, right? But that's really not the case. So my product managers have to be very closely aligned with the different business entities to understand their needs, how those things work together, and pair them with the user needs to come out with a good product experience. Not an easy task.
Not an easy task, and there's always this constant friction between ads and paid. Like I'm thinking about other products like YouTube, right? Like they have a premium subscription where they say if you don't want ads, you have to pay, or Spotify. So in your world, how do you combine those two? Is it a similar approach?
I think for us, again, it goes back to the user experience, and we want to be a premium product. And that's something that we think about as it relates to our advertising and subscription teams, right? How do we get out of the habit of people are not opposed to advertising. They're opposed to bad or intrusive advertising, right? So it really is on the product team to find the solutions that better integrates advertising into the experience so it doesn't feel intrusive and it does feel premium. And that, I think, is something that we work very closely with them. But again, I would say that there is alignment, at least because we are a subscription from the top down, that is the ultimate goal.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you launched the first paywall. Wall Street Journal was the first one to launch a paywall, but you were also personally leading the launch of the MarketWatch paywall, right?
Yeah, I was absolutely part of the MarketWatch paywall launch, which again took a historically free brand to launch a paywall and a subscription just a few years ago.
So tell me more about that, because it's literally introducing a new business model, right? For our users who've been used to something that is free, somehow now there is a new option. And like, how do you go about testing and making sure that this is good for the business while keeping the quality metrics for the user that you're aiming for?
Yeah, I think, of course, it all starts with user research and the amount of work that was done ahead of time. I cannot talk about that enough. But the thing that I do want to mention is there does become a point where you got to get it out. You got to get something live. And it's really about the testing and optimization that comes after that. So we did tons of user research to determine what were the models, the messages, et cetera, that we were going to go live with. But it was all about the testing and iterative approach that followed that got us to where we are today. So there is a moment where you almost have to take a leap of faith and have a very solid testing plan post-launch that takes you to where you ultimately want to be, which can look very different than what you originally thought.
Yeah, let's talk about that post-launch. You press the button, suddenly there is a paywall, and then what?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you don't press the button for everyone, right? Like the releases, of course, even within that, there is an element of testing to that, right? So how much are we going to release this? What are the different variations that we're going to go out with at launch? What are the priority things that we need to answer sooner rather than later? Is it price point? Is it the actual messaging? Is it the experience in the paywall itself? You have to come up with a very structured testing plan. And when you're doing something that large, you have to even prioritize the questions that you want to answer because there's so much. So I think that was really key, I think, to the success. Not only the iterative nature and the testing, but being really sure that we were answering the most meaty questions up front because there's so much to answer with such a large change like that.
I mean, your consumer brands grew from 2.43 million to over 4.86 million users in just 4 years. So can you take us to those moments of, okay, there is something here that seems to work. We are doing some tests and people are growing, but like there are some major leaps here that I think could be very relevant to other people who are building their own subscription businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, I can't speak to the direct strategies that helped us achieve all of that incredible work. Our amazing marketing team is, of course, behind much of that, but the product does play a critical role in delivering those experiences. And I think from a product perspective, it's really about making sure that the experience itself reinforces the value of the subscription, which is our journalism, right? So that is very different than a non-subscription model where, for us, the next click is only beneficial if that matched the user expectation and provided value. So it really is about driving value and exposing the value for the subscribers. And we think about that. We want subscribers to be able to go deeper. So how do we meaningfully package content? We want to ensure that subscribers don't miss out on what they care about. And with that, we've leveraged active personalization to date, things like author alerts, topics alerts, company alerts, features like saved articles. Again, we're producing a lot of content. They have access to a lot of information even outside of that subscription. You want to make sure that they're seeing the content that they really care about to show the value of that. And then lastly, I think it's really about testing new ways and delighting subscribers with some non-traditional formats, making sure that you're growing with them. So things like our newsletter space has been really successful. Digest newsletters, the 10 point from the Wall Street Journal, which is kind of the read that you wake up with or you commute on your train with. So again, I really think it's about thinking about always on every visit or every click, providing the value of the subscription.
You're making me think about some social media outlets and how that format, especially on video, it's so easy to digest. And you mentioned also the example of an audio app in the car that can give you the headlines within a few minutes. So can you tell me more about how you're thinking about those type of new formats, experimenting with giving the TLDR while also allowing the option for someone to go deep if that's what they want?
Yeah, we do a lot of thinking about this because we're not just competing with our traditional competitors, right? Because the primary place where all of this competition is happening is someone's phone, right? That's the experiences that you're talking about, whether it's vertical video or skimming and scanning, are so innate to the phone because the phone is such a different product than the previous products of journalism, right? Like think about a print newspaper or a website. Your phone it's personal. It's like an extension of you. It's with you at all times and it's interactive. Those are very big differences. And so when we think about how we have to solve for all user needs, right? We still have a base that wants to consume in a print like manner that still solves one user need for them. But we kind of have started shifting away from our users as thinking about them as segments. I kind of throw out the traditional personas because one individual person actually has different user needs throughout their day. So we could have a subscriber, if you will, who wants to wake up and read the more traditional Wall Street Journal print on their iPad, but they have their phone with them and they are consuming us through different modes throughout the day. So we have to weave those things together in a way, take what potentially does well on some of the sites that you mentioned, vertical video, skimming, scanning, personalization, but we have to weave it in a way that feels natural for our users based on their modes of consumption throughout the day.
That's such a good point. And you mentioned that you're in the hundreds of users, including free users. So when you are operating at that volume, like how do you go about identifying the different segments and providing a personalized experience?
Yeah, so we, of course, trust is really important to us. And when we talk to our users about personalization, that's often something that comes up, trust and control. That's where, of course, any personalization model is going to be a balancing act between active and passive. But we have been, in more recent years, leaning into the active element. So again, I mentioned active custom alerts based on the things that you care about, whether you have a fan favorite author or you are particularly interested in your own company or the competitors of that company. So leaning into kind of the controllable custom alerts is something that we've been very big on to date. But of course, when we do balance in that passive personalization, it's also about transparency. And that's something that is, again, really core to our brand. So ensuring that users understand why they're getting recommendations is an important kind of principle for us, if you will.
Something that I've noticed is happening now in media companies or social media companies that are trying to offer more media is expanding their product portfolio into games, recipes, and other properties that just get attention, right? Like New York Times has recipes and it's very famous for that. LinkedIn now launched games. So as you think about the future and providing this type of holistic experience where a user can find different things, like what are some of the considerations that you are making when you place these type of bets?
Yeah, well, I think I'll go back to what I kicked this off with, which is what is Dow Jones? We provide information, news, and data to help people make decisions. So, in any of the features that we develop, of course, we cannot lose sight of that. So, you know, that is our core principle. What are the different types of experiences, features, and functionality? Again, to pull from across the board around the information, the news, and the data that we're producing to drive the full 360 usage. It's going to look very different than gaming and recipes, of course.
Yeah, can you give me a sneak peek into the future?
The sneak peek into the future, I think, look, we have access and we are creating, again, information, news, and data across the board. We do have, if we think about our maybe more financial brands, thinking about Barron's and MarketWatch, they have a really interesting dichotomy within their experiences right now where they have the content that their newsroom is producing, but we also have market data is a key element within that experience. So thinking through how we bring kind of two sides of the coin together in a more seamless experience is going to drive engagement, right? It's all about frictionless, but it's really about taking what we are creating or what we have access to and bringing them together to drive engagement. So that's just one example if you look at some of our more financial brands.
I need to ask you about artificial intelligence, of course, because otherwise this wouldn't be a good interview.
I was wondering when you were going to ask me about that.
Well, I want to exactly. Why don't you tell us more about this? How are you seeing this opportunity from your side of the business, and what are some of the specific use cases that maybe you are already experimenting with?
Yeah, and again, I'm surprised it took this long. AI, of course, cannot go unmentioned. It's going to change things, and we, of course, have to be prepared for that. But again, here is where I fully believe that trusted news and information wins, right? And of course, protecting the IP of our journalism is important. But again, this is going to easily fall into garbage in, garbage out, just like any data model. So Dow Jones is operating from a position of strength here. I think, how do we leverage the best of AI to ensure trusted journalism is showcased and continues to prosper is something that I don't think anyone has the answer to. But I think we are doing quite a bit of experimentation on our own end as it relates to the efficiencies of our team, as well as features and functionalities for users.
Davos hosted the World Economic Forum a few months ago, and they published this report about the global risks. And I believe that AI misinformation or AI news misinformation was ranking in the top 3. So it's definitely something that, especially for a media organization, I can imagine it's like top of mind. At the same time, I can see the opportunity. So for a leader that is being asked this, not only externally, but internally, like, how do you go about like bringing your team along, and helping them also use this as an opportunity and be the ones who are maybe advocating for innovation without feeling afraid of like losing their jobs?
Yeah, and I think the product management team is probably better positioned than maybe, elsewhere. I think from that perspective, it's really, innovation is not just about spending money to buy new technologies. What you're talking about and what I love about innovation is really about how do you drive new ways of thinking, which is how you're going to actually use these new technologies. So from that perspective, I do think it really goes back to collaboration and breaking down the silos amongst different teams. So of course, we've spun up different AI groups that pulled together people from across the organization to talk very freely and openly about the different experimentation that is going on, as well as things that they find relevant. But I think it becomes less scary when you get people in a room and you start talking about it. And again, I think there's a lot of unanswered questions here. So again, the ways of thinking really need to be cross-functional and collaborative to figure out how we're actually going to use those new technologies. And I think that's the key.
Even beyond AI, I believe that best leaders are also great coaches. And I know you care and you have a strong point of view on like how to train your own team. So I would love to learn more about specifics on how you give people opportunity and teach them how to become product leaders.
Yeah, and I think to me, product management is so interesting because it's about operating and thinking simultaneously in three different time horizons, right, at the same time. And I believe that this can actually be broken down into different time horizons that you can build upon for more junior level product people. So, of course, the first is what are your teams doing today, tomorrow, this sprint, next sprint? That's really how do I execute? So that's getting really good at some of the very basic agile skills when you think about epics, user stories, sprint planning. Once you get the basics right, your brain now needs to be thinking about not what are we just doing today, tomorrow, next week? What are we doing this quarter, next quarter? And that's really about planning larger projects, like the requirements gathering and really working with teams cross-functionally. Once you've got that time horizon down, it's really about not just next quarter, it's about next year, it's about 5 years. And that's where strategy really comes into play. So you start to see, Carlos, how I think it's a little hard to grasp, but there is a way to break that down into different skill sets that kind of ladder up to different levels within product management.
I agree. And I also believe that you do not need to be senior in order to be allowed to start thinking long term. Like,
Agreed. Agreed. But I do think it's helpful for at least my brain space to start to package the different skills that are required for those different time horizons, really.
yep. And how far in advance do you at least try to have a point of view?
Me, myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think my job is not even just next year. My job is the next 5 years and making sure a lot of the things that we talked about in terms of setting our company up for success, whether that is the outside forces at play or it's how, building up that platform approach and how the brands and the platforms are going to come together to ensure that what we're building today makes sense for us in years to come, at least from a foundational perspective.
I'm going to need to press on something that I know was painful for you, but hopefully it's a good learning opportunity for many of us. You use the word platform quite a bit because I know it's critical and I know it wasn't easy for you to actually re-platform. And at some point you have to pay off your tech debt, and sometimes it's not just about making small improvements; it's about ripping off the band-aid and truly set up the foundation for multiple years of growth. So how did you go about that? And first of all, like what was the rationale behind, okay, now it's the time?
Yeah, and again, this was when I was product manager, I think maybe number one, or maybe had a small team. The task at hand in terms of replatforming the Barron's app, and really, was a young product manager at the time and got thrown into it, and they said, "Go rebuild this app from start to finish." And also, by the way, we want it done ASAP. So, somewhat of a daunting experience, but probably one of the best learning experiences in my career. I think twofold. It forced me to become a better product manager in some of the execution tasks that I just mentioned, right? Like you got to have your stuff together. If you have this huge project, you got to be writing those user stories well. You got to be setting up the prioritization and the sprint planning. But even beyond that, it was the first time I was leading a multi-quarter project from start to finish. And so there's a process element there. And, the process you go in with, you got to learn with your team and pivot along the way on how you as a leader are going to change up that process. And that's where I kind of fell in love with retros, if you will. And everyone, oh, retros, I don't know. retros are one of the most important tools that product managers have in terms of adjusting their process, particularly as it relates to a multi-quarter or multi-month project. So again, like, huge project, learn so much as it relates to like the very tactical elements, but really how do you drive the process for such a large team?
Maybe now that you have your scar tissue from that experience, you're obviously more empathetic towards other people coming and proposing those type of ideas. From my perspective, and as a CEO, and I try to prioritize our investments, I've noticed that these type of investments in tech debt, right, or in platform, in customer support, in things that are not directly going to impact revenue growth, tend to be deprioritized over fancy, more sexy, or easier to drive revenue from. Like now, Gen AI, if someone pitches you a Gen AI feature, it's like, cool, right? Like, how do you go about, like making sure that there is the right balance between growth, innovation, and things that can generate revenue in a relatively short period of time, while also ensuring that you are also supporting your long-term goals?
Yeah, and I think you're right. Tech debt is hard to prioritize, but I also somewhat disagree with that because even going back to the four kind of pillars that I referenced, we have data to support that performance impacts reach, engagement, and satisfaction that impact the bottom line and the business numbers. You know, whether it's performance of the load of the page or if it's efficiency of the newsroom that's creating that, there are ways to measure that and actually showcase in a data-oriented way how important that is and what that's going to do. Yes, it's not a shiny new object, if you will, but there is a way to get the data to support that in terms of what that's going to do to ladder up to the business.
I think that's a good point, like showing that data in a way that it's relevant to the person who's consuming it. Because sometimes for an executive, it's not only how much money we're going to make, it's also sometimes the scary way. Like if we don't do this, we're going to die. Or this is also going to contribute to revenue. Finding that type of vocabulary that someone who's not in the data every day can get. And I know that's also something important to you. You talk about being data-led versus being data-informed. So
Yeah,
maybe you can provide more context around like,
it goes
what does
right.
that mean?
One of my biggest beliefs there, which is, context is queen, right? Like, don't bring me a number, give me the context. So even in terms of, why is a platform, so why is something really important from tech debt? Bring me it is going to, we know because we did X that it's going to increase efficiency by 2X, right? Like that is not just a number saying we're going to move by 15%. You're telling me that that's good. Like, and you're bringing the context to that. So I think as it relates to data, I always tell my team, like, I never want to see just one number. I need a base for that. And like, I need you to pull out the insights and I need the context around that.
And kind of bringing that back to a subscription conversation that we had, I see sometimes in publications or other businesses, they will have this crazy annual offer. If you buy right now, we'll give you like a big discount. But that can also influence the churn, right? So looking at not just the story of one data point, but also like multiple data points, I think can also paint a bigger picture.
Always, always, always. Context is queen.
Well, thank you, Ryan, for your time here with me. It's been awesome to learn more about your journey and how you're building product at such a large scale.
Thank you so much, Carlos. I've appreciated it.